Welcome to the Hands-On Business Podcast. As you all know, the pandemic has stressed individuals and work cultures alike. It seems the topics of well-being and burnout are everywhere. So today I'm joined by Anne Avgerin. This is the first person I've had on the podcast several times, and that's for two simple reasons. The first one is that, as I said, well-being and mental health have really been elevated over the recent years, and specifically in the COVID pandemic in recent months. That's number one. Number two is that every time I get Anne on, we get a great response and loads of questions. So obviously makes sense to get her on again. So Anne is going to help us make sense of what we're hearing about well-being and why it matters. Now, those of you who've listened to Anne before will know that she's a mental health therapist and a coach, and that she's also worked in community mental health for almost 2 years and has 25 years experience in large global corporate settings. Therefore, she understands stress and burnout in both the corporate and mental health environments. So now, those of you who haven't listened to Anne before, where the hell have you been? I advise you to go and watch those previous podcasts immediately. So welcome back, Anne. What have you been up to?
Thanks, Hakeem. It's a delight to be here. I love speaking on your podcast. What I've been up to is a lot of community mental health. In the United States, we have insurance, and those without insurance have a hard time finding mental health services. And so where I worked provided mental health services to those without insurance on a sliding scale. So it was a very important segment of our population here in Portland. There's a lot of need. And so I use the word worked. I just actually am taking a break from community mental health after 2 years during the pandemic. It's been intense, and I'm taking a step back and addressing my own well-being, I guess you would say, for a little while.
So practicing what you preach, which is critically important, I think.
Exactly. It's been intense.
I can imagine. So everyone's talking about well-being, mental health all the time at the moment, and I think generally people have a similar sense of what it means. But from a practitioner like yourself, when we say well-being, what is it we're actually talking about?
So I'm going to give you what I would interpret to be, the business sector view and a little bit of the psychology view as well. So there's also a word wellness that comes out there. So well-being and wellness are a little bit different. Wellness, I think of all those wellness drives that companies had, at least in the States, in the last decade. Get moving. It's mostly health and wellness. So it's kind of focused on your physical health. So definitely physical health is a portion of well-being, but well-being is something a bit wider than just physical health. So I pulled out some definitions online. I checked public health sources like the CDC, and well-being encompasses your feelings about your life in general, or your place of work in general. So do you have kind of more positive versus negative connections or feelings most of the time? So we're looking for people with a total sense of well-being that includes more positive emotions over negative emotions over time. That's what they talk about in the public health realm. In a psychology or mental health, we use the term biopsychosocial, right? So bio, your biology, psycho, your cognitive and mental health, if you will, and social is social connection, right? So in a traditional psychology or mental health standpoint, if a person is depressed, we would want them to make sure that they have some social connections in their day or in their lives, right? So we saw during the pandemic that isolation is challenging to one's mental health. A lot of people live alone. And when the example that we discussed earlier of other countries where people were restricted to just their home or 2 kilometers of their home in Ireland for some periods of time, or 5 miles of their home in Australia for other periods of time, that isolation takes a toll on that social piece. So when I think of biopsychosocial in the workplace, I also would say social includes a sense of connection to your job, a sense of connection to the values that the company espouses, we're seeing in you know, the millennials and the newer generations in business that there's a demand for organizations to walk the walk and talk the talk, right? So if you say that you're people-centered organization or, you know, employee focused, where does that show up that's beneficial to the employee? If you say you're an organization that cares about the environment, how are you doing that, right? So the social piece, when I think of any kind of organizational culture or workplace culture, that includes, are we connected to each other? How did we do that during the pandemic? But are we also connected to the values and of the company in general, or the organization in general? And are we seeing transparency or authenticity or that kind of thing? So that's how I would define it, with both the psychology lens and a business lens. When I think of biopsychosocial, are those needs being addressed and allowing you to thrive in the workplace?
Okay, thanks. And I'm assuming that when you're looking at it, that obviously the feelings about your work, your life, and the link to how you resonate with the values of the organization that you're working for, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, has the link been broken because of lockdown? Has that been stretched? Because obviously you're not seeing your colleagues. All of the things that you've just described are almost like the antithesis of working from home permanently.
Right, so we're having to rethink what social connection looks like in the workplace. We encourage that by Zoom or by phone. Do we have one-on-one standing kind of chat phone calls with our employees? Do we have Zoom lunches, if you will? Some people do trivia lunches, or kind of a happy hour after work, where, you know, people come with their favorite cocktail, and we just change from our normal Zoom attire to our living room Zoom attire, if you will. But so keeping that social connection to your colleagues is important, as is, again, that the person feels connected to the values of the organization. And so that could have been in place or could have been broken prior to the pandemic, where companies, there seems to be a disconnect at times between company values and what people see show up, right? So that's always important.
So I suppose people are always looking for signs of if it's broken. So how do you notice, or how do we notice, and how does one notice when it's not present, when well-being isn't there? You know, what should we be looking out for?
Well, I looked at some, what I would say, macro indicators, but the first thing is employee engagement, right? So there was a big push for a lot of employee engagement surveys to take place in the last decade. You know, the one in the States has been Gallup. Do you guys use Gallup?
Yes, we do, yeah.
As an institution. So people are now turning the results on their head, if you will, or looking at it a different way and saying, you know, maybe some portion of employee disengagement is not just the individual, but it's more of a sign of burnout, if you will, or it's, you know, that disengagement is this exhaustion and fatigue, or this disconnect with the values of the company, or, you know, the relationship with the boss is what a lot of people focus on. So the employee engagement surveys, I think, are a great place to start the investigation of what piece of that could be well-being, right? So I don't think that we've done a close enough examination of the engagement surveys, at least in my experience, but you can check out the Gallup website. There's all sorts of connections now in the last few years between engagement and well-being. So people are starting to ask for more of their biopsychosocial needs to be met in the workplace, where we spend a lot of our time, right? So, and even in 2016, there was a Gallup survey that said 7 out of 10 employees are disengaged to various degrees. And now the folks who are specializing in burnout are saying, well, you know, some of that could be burnout. And we need to take a closer investigation, or be more curious about employee engagement surveys. So Hakeem, have you had any experience with employee engagement surveys?
I have, and interestingly enough, I was going to mention it actually, because it's coincidentally at Wernicare, we've just started an employee engagement program, which came out earlier, in November. Yeah, so literally we've just done it, and in lots of other companies I've worked in, we've had employee engagement surveys. It's an interesting one because the different companies I've done it in will do different things with it. So some of those companies will actually then take that into account, look at it, change the way that they work with it with their employees, and actually try and move forward. Whereas other people, it's almost like a tick box. Yeah, we've now done the employee engagement survey. Yeah, right, next. And they're not really looking at the results.
Right, and then people don't give you their honest feedback, or if they think that there's going to be repercussions from if they indicate that they're disengaged, is there a way for it to be private? How is the data managed? Does it go to a third party? So sometimes people fear being honest, and that could also show up in an employee engagement survey. So it's important to do two things: to maintain the privacy of it, and to do something with it in a way that shows you're listening to that feedback, right? So that's that two-way dialogue. You want that some engagement from your employees so that we can, I like the word co-create, we can co-create a workplace that works for everyone. It doesn't just work for some and not others.
Well, it's like a circle, isn't it, really? Because it's common sense to try and create a culture where you're honest, you're genuine, you're authentic, and people will give you actual real life feedback. And if you create that culture, automatically, when you do an employee engagement survey, you'll get better data because people will feel comfortable. And then that almost creates that engagement because people feel that actually my employees really genuinely interested in what I have to say. And when I say what I need to say, people listen to it, and there's change that occurs because of that. So it's like that feedback loop, isn't it, really?
Absolutely, definitely. Well, that was very well described. Again, if depending on how disengaged people are, or what the culture of, if they're a checkbox ticker or not, it might take a little work to get to that point where this dialogue is real, if you will, and people can build trust over time. And that's really important for well-being, is trusting that if you're asked for feedback, that your feedback is going to be incorporated somehow, or at a minimum acknowledged. So just the time spent and the effort put in, thanking people for participating and being honest. If hey, these top 5 things came up, but we can really only address the first one, or help me prioritize what the first one should be in our department or in our organization. So the engagement is interesting to look at these days because burnout is showing up more in engagement, and if that's not built into the survey, it could be kind of a follow-up survey, if you will, to try to drill down on where people are disengaged, right? Some people are disengaged, and that's okay, right? So long as they're not destructive to the organization, if you will. But some people are disengaged because they're exhausted, or they are having to make hard choices between, family and work, if you will, or that kind of thing. The other place that I think we see well-being showing up, or the need for well-being, is in employee turnover. So, you've heard this great resignation. I did, you can do a quick web search. I don't know what the stats are in the UK, but in a recent Gallup analysis, 48% of Americans are actively searching for new job opportunities. A lot of people are quitting without having another plan, if you will. So they've been able to save up during the pandemic, but they're just done with the stressors at work, or in particular, how the organization handled the pandemic and allowed for people to, take extra leave, or when the pandemic first started, the extra anxiety that people felt. Maybe they'd never felt anxiety before. So there was a bit of anxiety and depression going on throughout the pandemic. And so are the work expectations the same? Did the organization have situational awareness and say, my goodness, I can't have the same expectations because people are overloaded with this pandemic stress. They're trying to figure out, how do I manage kids learning from home? Those kinds of things. So people are voting with their feet, if you will. So employee turnover is another area where I think well-being is showing up.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose that's not surprising, because if we're defining well-being as how people feel about their work and their life, the pandemic has given people time to reflect, and I think people have reflected on what that really means to them. What does work mean to them in terms of their work-life balance? And people have always talked about a work-life balance, but generally people have been so busy working, they haven't really been able to do anything about the work-life balance. Whereas I think when you were forced into that environment, and you're in the UK, certainly you weren't allowed 1 hour a day of exercise and you could go for a walk, I think you're really reflecting upon your connections, your purpose of life, your purpose of work, how that all fits together. And that's probably reflected in the fact that lots of people have then come back and thought, actually, maybe this isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life, or for the rest of my working life, and hence the employee turnover. Which leads me on to my next question, which was going to be, you have lots of people who I think get it, and that well-being is important, but you still have those people from yesteryear who think, oh, well-being, it's all a load of nonsense. Well-being in the workplace, why should I care about that? So the question is, why should a company care about well-being in the workplace?
Well, those costs of employee there are costs that people assign to disengagement and employee turnover, right? So how expensive is it to rehire and retrain? Those are, you could put that into an ROI. There's lots of surveys out there. And what does the workplace have to do with it in general, right? So what does the workplace have to do with well-being? Some things that impact well-being are, how is the workplace set up, literally, right? So that now that people have had this exposure to working remote, a lot of people are resisting going back to the office full time. And so again, you might experience more turnover, that cost of turnover. Why should companies care, or organizations care, by forcing people to go back to work, right? Physically in an office place, right? So a lot of companies I've heard of are going to hybrid approaches, right? We can have some remote and some on-site, and there's reasons for on-site as well, that social connection we talked about earlier. But that's in the mix. Are you going to lose people in this transition back to the office place, if you will? When I think of literally how the office place is set up, I think of, we have open plan. Before we had cubicles, and then we went to open plan. Well, open plan is a physical construct, doesn't work for everyone. Yeah. Some folks are introverts, some folks are prone to distraction, and they might know themselves better to know that that's not an ideal work environment for them. And that's actually why working from home has worked better, right? Because they can create the niche environment that works for them. And also another physical thing, when I think I'm thinking of some of the biology and the psychology of it, is we talked earlier, you and I, about sitting all day. Sitting all day doesn't work for everyone. So, those literal accommodations for people to be able to stand, have a standing desk, or one that moves to standing or sitting, that helps a lot of people who have structural issues. So, why should we care? I think it's, the human thing to do, but I also think that there's a real cost in terms of employees leaving, right? And that's just the cost to the organization. We're not talking about the cost to the individual. So what are your thoughts about some of those physical environment pieces, or remote or on-site? Are you guys going through something similar with debating, are people back in the office full time, and how is that working?
Yeah, no, I think certainly, I think it's a topic that is front of mind in virtually every business, and as you just described, you have some draconian ones, which are just basically saying, and I think I might have said it on the last podcast, that you have the next boss, and it's many years ago when working from home wasn't as common as it is now, who basically said, no, they can't work from home because I want to see the whites of their eyes, which I thought was very interesting, because I'm more concerned about what they deliver rather than actually seeing them right across the desk from me. But so I think you still have some of those organizations who aren't what I would describe as enlightened, and oh well, no, we want everyone back in the office, so we don't care what happens, and if they can't deal with it, they can leave. So I think you have that group of people, but then you have a more sensible group of people, as I would look at it, who are saying, well, actually, what works for us as an organisation is determined by what works for the individuals who work in the organisation. So then they're having a hybrid model. So because as you were talking about the psychosocial, then coming in the office occasionally is useful for that social element, to ensure that you have those connections. But then, as you just elucidated there, working from home also works because you may have childcare issues, or you may just have a better setup at home, which means you can focus better than being in an open plan office. I would never bear well in an open plan office because I like talking too much. So not only would I be distracting others, I'd be distracting myself. So even before COVID, I always used to say to people, if you see me in the office, it means that I've got most of my work done. Because when I want to get some real work done, I work from home even before COVID, because I know that I need focus and I need to be locked away to get stuff done. So, go on.
So adding to that a little bit, you know, my husband's staff here in Portland, they all went into the office every day through the whole pandemic. They preferred it, right? That wasn't a requirement. My husband prefers working from home. However, their home situation, you know, they weren't set up with the best internet, or there were more distractions at home, or that kind of thing, and they preferred going into the office. So that's okay. I just think that at a certain point in one's life that people can self-manage, right? Let's be people like competent adults who are working, they're offering their skill sets to an office environment, and they know what works for them, and let's just be reasonable about it. And I think there's legitimate reasons to have folks come in a hybrid model. First of all, we have lots of commercial office real estate sitting there, so it's a huge cost to cover both, right? And so we all get that. Let's be transparent about that if that's the reason, right? So, hey, we can't get out of this lease for 5 years, so we need to increase some utilization, and we're pushing for people to come into the office a certain number of days, but also acknowledging that for some, it works better to be working from home, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that you've just hit the nail on the head there. It seems to me to be common sense, and I've probably said before, but unfortunately common sense isn't that common, so we probably need to call it something else. I think it's a bit of a misnomer,
Right.
because the way I look at it is, if you recruit the right people, which is what we should all be aspiring to do, then, if you just said there, you've got sensible, intelligent human beings who know how to manage their time, and we've all got tasks and things that we need to do. And interesting enough, in our business, what we were asked, and what everyone was asked was, okay, so what do people feel is right for their departments? So we haven't got a one size fits all, actually. And my solution was actually, well, I like meeting my team, and I think my team enjoys that team environment. So we said, all right, well, what we're going to do is have meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays. So, you know, we come in on a Monday and a Wednesday, so we can have those meetings. And then if you want to come in at other times, then the office space is there. And I go in every Monday and Wednesday generally. And because you can also take them online. But then, you know, if you don't want to, then you don't have to come in for those other times. And I think that's worked really well, because it gives people a flexibility. And it's something that we've determined ourselves as a department, as a team, rather than somebody just saying, right, you need to be in every day, or you can just work from home. And I think that's worked very, very well.
Yeah, I like that. You know, that team self-management, if you will, right? So does the workplace environment allow for that flexibility, right? So again, you know, business is in place to make money at the end of the day. However, the well-being of employees will also show up as absenteeism or increased sick days or those kinds of things. You know, another thing that the workplace contributes to well-being is, what is the culture of expectations in the workplace, and who do those expectations serve, for example? So let's just take email. Is it expected that people respond to email after hours, if you will, right? So some places and some bosses 24/7, they're sending you email. In the past, they would travel and they expected everybody to, you know, respond immediately, if you will. Maybe it's okay to send email after hours. lay out the expectation that we're not expecting a response, right? So, hey, I'm traveling, or I'm not a good sleeper, so I'm up at midnight and I'm sending my ideas to you, but hey, we'll talk about that in the morning, right? At 8 a.m. But what are those that culture of expectations at work that adds stress to employees, right? So do people, are they allowed to take a lunch break even? Or I think one of the folks that responded to your survey on LinkedIn talked about, do people even take a lunch, or do they sit at their desks and eat? And so maybe they prefer that. However, maybe they feel pressured to do that, like, oh, the boss is watching, that kind of thing. So
I mean, one thing you said earlier, actually, Annie, is the answer to those people who are naysayers and, oh, well, it's well-being, it's all very woke, etc., is that, well, okay, just look at two things you mentioned. The first one was the ROI. So you're going to lose ROI if you start losing people, and especially if you start losing good people. And then the absenteeism, that's a significant cost to a business. But those two things are significant cost to businesses, because, especially absenteeism, because who's going to cover the work? How long are they going to be off for? Do you have to get some temporary staff in? Are those temporary staff going to be as good as those people who are now off because they don't feel that they have well-being in the workplace? So I think even if you don't believe in well-being in the workplace, it's worthwhile actually having a look at what's happening to your staff, and certainly what's happening to your staff over this pandemic, because I'll be surprised if there hasn't been changes in behavior in many organizations due to the pandemic, and that's probably often tied to the way people are feeling, i.e. well-being. So in that case, so what's showing up in the workplace specifically, and we can talk about outside of the workplace as well, but specifically in the workplace, because I know that's what my listeners will be interested to understand. What's showing up? What metrics? What are the things that we can see that happen?
Well, so again, those two macro things about looking at employee engagement, and then also looking at turnover as kind of big indicators. I guess maybe on an individual level, right? You might see missing, more absenteeism, people not, a change in work performance, some of these things that kind of go into the mental health realm. Maybe their personality seems a little different. Maybe they're a bit more irritable. Maybe they've said to a colleague, or, they're not sleeping well. I mean, some of those things show up as, that kind of goes a little bit more into either acute or chronic stressors, or, maybe the anxiety bucket or the depression buckets. Those kinds of things show up at the individual level if people feel comfortable sharing them. So those kinds of changes in behaviors, changes in emotional affect, if you will, declining performance of, job performance, those types of things could show up. Maybe they're more irritable than you remember them being, or that kind of thing. And so that sometimes goes in the emotional well-being direction. And again, if they don't feel comfortable giving feedback on why receiving a certain benefit would be important to them, then you might not know that before they leave, right, that they didn't feel somehow that their needs were being met. So what's your policies on funerals, for example? There's if you in the States, it's generally, you have 3 days, and it depends on who died, right? So how they're related to you. And we've seen through, Ricky Gervais has a wonderful series out talking about coping with the death of a spouse in the way that only Ricky Gervais can convey. But, grief is not something that you can put in a bucket, that it's these 3 days and then get back to work kind of a thing. Or, a lot of times there's like anniversaries of deaths that impact people, and they might want an extra day, for goodness sakes, to go to, spend that anniversary of the death, by themselves or with other family or friends or that kind of thing. So if so those types of things would show up a little bit in declined performance or emotions or that kind of thing. And how flexible are your policies in addressing the needs of humans across their lifespan and across all the stressors that happen in a lifespan. So
I'm guessing the best way to deal with it is, as we were talking earlier, is trying to create a culture so that the well-being is catered for without, because a lot of the stuff we're talking about is, oh, well, when bad things happen, these are the things that manifest. And I suppose prevention, as they say, is better than cure. And what all organizations should be trying to do is get to a situation, you're never going to get there for everybody, but get to a situation where people feel valued, people feel that they have a supportive environment, and therefore they never get to that situation where they're feeling stressed because they feel they can talk about it at work or with their boss or in an environment, a safe environment. I'm guessing that's the ideal situation to be in.
Yes, it's the ideal. And so we want to create, benefits, if you will, or I always think of benefits, right? Is there coaching available? Is there counseling available? Or, you as a manager, Hakeem, do you know what your company offers in that space? You might not be an expert on grief, and most people are not, right? So if you're starting to notice something that you think might benefit your employee, maybe that individual hasn't thought of it, what are the services and benefits that are available that can support that person, right? So we want to create there's no stigma around asking for some help or something that might feel a little bit out of the box, if you will. One thing I came across recently that I'm not sure where this fits in, but the BBC just had an article about folks with disabilities in the workplace. I don't know if did you catch that article?
I didn't actually know.
Well, so it's an estimate that 4.4 million workers in the UK, and I looked it up, it's out of 24 million workers, so that's 1 in 6, have some kind of disability. And at least a quarter of them hide their disability. So it could be something like chronic pain. It could be something for women like endometriosis. They hide the disability, one would assume, because they fear that they're going to be discriminated against in a certain way, or there's not going to be support, if you will. And the folks that were mentioned in this article said they really appreciated, again, the working from home in the pandemic. If you have chronic physical pain, you can sit and work for a few hours and then you can go lay down and recover. And so these types of things where people are hiding some kind of physical disability that could be structural, it could be internal that others don't see. If you could have, unfortunate people who get migraines all the time, in the pandemic, people could self-manage because they could take the breaks that they needed to take. And so that's also an example of, does the culture even make provisions for some of those out-of-the-box things that maybe a person doesn't want to disclose to their boss? Maybe I don't feel comfortable talking about, no offense, Hakeem, my female health with you, right? But it's like, thank goodness, I don't want that to happen. But women across a lifespan have PMDD, which is a diagnosis of premenstrual dysphoric disorder. They have endometriosis. 30% of women do fertility assistance. They have menopause, like all those things. So, gosh, I might want to talk with my male boss about it, but it'd be great if I had benefits that acknowledged that I can self-manage in the workplace. So we have to think of, are everybody's needs being addressed? And are we making it possible for people to kind of have those benefits so they don't have to disclose, right? Or they can disclose to what they feel comfortable with. I always want things like mental health to be destigmatized in the workplace and everywhere, that it's okay to need a bit of therapy, for a few months to address something that you haven't seen before, like a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So a couple of questions that drop out of that, and I think one you've sort of answered, because the first one I was going to ask was, so because we were talking about how does it show up, what are the signs you can look for, if you've got somebody who's just very good at masking it, you've just been talking about people masking their disabilities, if you've got someone who's very good at masking it, but well-being isn't where it should be, how are there any other things you can do to try and sort of like understand it, or other little signs that would give you an indication? Because I'm just thinking you do. I remember I was speaking to one lady, who I won't mention her name, who was basically saying that they worked in a corporate job, and probably for about 2 years they were having suicidal thoughts, they were stressed out, but they were holding it together so well that no one would have ever guessed that that's how they were feeling. So I'm just wondering, in that sort of circumstance, how could a company or a manager or an environment have helped that individual?
Yeah, I think that goes, it's a really excellent question. And it's hard if somebody feels pressured to hide what's really going on, or they don't really know where to turn. You can't, again, the organization can't necessarily be responsible for everything. There could be elevated awareness of, again, mental health resources. You could post, suicide hotlines, those kinds of things. So sometimes when I think of, is it the organization, is it management, is it the individual, who is responsible for the lack of well-being? I mean, there's a responsibility on all three parts, right? So the individual this might be the first time when they've had, a depression that leads to suicidal ideation. This might be the first time in their life. They're not even aware yet of what's going on for them. A lot of people don't, again, recognize when their mental health is taking a little bit of a nosedive. They've never experienced it. So there is some, is there some ability for resources to be available that might elevate that awareness, if you will? So could a workplace have, mental health days, like here's your tip sheet of signs and symptoms. Do you know anybody who's experiencing these types of distress, like sleeplessness, suicidal ideation? I mean, there could be, a therapist that comes in and helps, develop like the tips of the trade, if you will. So the organization can try to help elevate awareness. The individual, if they're not aware yet, or if they're not reporting it, you can't make the organization be a mind reader, if you will. So the first piece of elevating awareness is the individual and management and the organization. So is the organization, do they have well-being on the radar, right? I think there's been this swelling of, consciousness and awareness that this is important. Forbes magazine has had articles recently about well-being being all HR managers across the Fortune 1000 companies see well-being as something that's on the radar that needs to be addressed, however the company decides to address it. So how do we elevate that awareness at the organization level, at the management level, and at the individual level? It's hard when people hide it, but you want to set up some awareness, and you want to set up a way to ask questions or give feedback that is truly private and anonymous. Because again, as we saw with sexual harassment in the United States, I'm sure everywhere, if the person who lodges a sexual harassment allegation fears that they're going to be outed, right? That it's going to be known, if there's going to be repercussions, they're not going to say anything. They're not in the position of power. They're the powerless person in that dynamic, and they're not going to report. So my long-winded answer is, everybody has a role to play in elevating awareness, destigmatizing these issues, trying to find some resources that are available. And is there a way to ask some questions or give some feedback anonymously?
No, thank you very much. And then my second question was almost like the reverse of that. So let's say, for example, you're in an environment and you can quite clearly see some of those things you talked about, like drop off of performance, mood swings or behavioral changes, but you've got a manager, or the manager who is a caring person, but doesn't like to talk about feelings. What sort of advice would you give to that manager? Because they can see there's an issue, but they don't know where to start, how to approach it, what to say. I'm just trying to think of practical tips for someone like that who's struggling to really help somebody but they can see that person needs help.
So I mean, not everybody likes talking about feelings. Not everybody likes talking about a death, if you will. So it's okay not to have those kind of soft skills. And that's why I think if places could develop a script or a tip sheet or that kind of thing, in that conversation, it could just be that authentic, call it out, like, hey, I don't really know what's going on with you. I want to, and I don't feel it's my place to lead this discussion, but I want to make you aware of some resources that were available. Again, it's like, it's calling out like, hey, I see you. I see something's going on. I don't know what it is, and I'm probably not the best person to facilitate that conversation. I want to support you. I want you to get the help that you need. And so let me just give you a range of things that might be helpful. It could be everything from a suicide hotline to mental health services, to coaching, to some books that have been helpful or programs that have been helpful to you, the manager. So you want to acknowledge that you see. I think that would be the very powerful for the employee who, let's just say they're having some kind of depression and they don't think anybody notices, right? But I don't know how to facilitate that conversation. Just say, again, I'm not sure what's going on. You're showing up a little bit differently at work, and I want to make you aware that this range of options could be helpful for you. Because again, depression shows up, as an example, differently for everyone. I always tell people, if every one of my clients had depression and everybody was 40 years old with depression, I can guarantee you it shows up differently. And some people become hyper-functional, like you said, right? So there's that, like, I'm so functional on the outside that nobody would understand this disconnect that's happening on the inside. So it's hard in the mental health profession as the professionals to spot everything, if you will. But that acknowledgement, I see you, these things might be helpful. We don't, I'm here if you want to talk about it, but we don't have to talk about it. And if it's a depression or a fear of suicide for the person, if you could connect them with their own resources, right? So is there anybody, in your life that you feel comfortable talking about what's going on? And, that's like helping the person problem solve in this, abstract example.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the thing that jumped out there was the acknowledgement, isn't it? So what you're saying, it's because I think you get managers who believe that they should have answers to every problem and they should be able to solve everything, when what you're saying is, well, actually, it's all right not to know, but what you should at least do is acknowledge that you've seen there might be a challenge or an issue, and then every case is then taken on its merits in terms of whether you have to speak about the feelings or whether you just signpost them to somebody who knows more about you, or signpost them to resources that can support them, rather than thinking, well, I'm the manager, so I need to have a solution to support this particular individual, because in the best will in the world, we don't know everything. I don't think anyone does that I'm aware of.
I know, but that is the pressure in the workplace, isn't it? I experienced that in my journey in my 25 years is, we're expected to know and we're expected to tell, right? And so we show up, organized and ready and knowing how to problem solve. And it's tricky when it gets into the mental health space. Something that could also be helpful if we don't want to broker in the land of feelings is to also, try to, again, acknowledge it, offer some resources, and get the person talking about something positive in their life. Again, I'm making the assumption that maybe it's depression, maybe it's a change in health that they're not ready to divulge, but you kind of notice them a bit lackluster in the workplace. If we can get a conversation where they focus on things that are joys for them, oh gosh, you haven't talked about your dog recently, tell me about your dog, or are you planning on taking a trip, or tell me about a hobby. I think that the pandemic has opened everybody's worlds to, their home, if you will. And sometimes we forget the value of how people light up when they talk about what is joyful to them. So we don't have to, again, stay in this emotional depth or this, tiptoeing around the emotional depth, but for too long, right? We acknowledge, we resource, but then we also remind people of the things in their own life that they're proud of, or that they're interested in, or that they would advocate for, like a charity that they're just thrilled to talk about. And then, we're kind of helping to elevate that moment with them to one that's a bit more uplifting.
Thank you very much. And then just to take it into the real realm, because a lot of what we're talking about is these are things that we do if this situation was to occur. Have you got any examples, and obviously no names, that where you've worked with somebody or in an environment to address well-being and create well-being, and how's that manifested itself, and what are the sort of things that you've done?
My experience in the last couple of years has been in a small organization and not a larger organization. So I'll go back to the time in my corporate career when the ability to get paid to donate your time to help charities first came up, right? So I thought that was a great boost of well-being. We didn't put that in the well-being bucket, but it was that idea that let's connect you socially with something other than work, right? Something, sometimes we got to pick the charities. We painted a domestic violence shelter. I participated in helping educate, second graders about business concepts, and fourth graders, they were very smart. And it was hilarious how much the business infighting of their board of directors reflected, the meetings I was going to with our internal executive team. But that was one of the pieces that was a help in well-being. So that's one example I can think of. Another example of well-being is sometimes giving people an extra day off. So again, that came up even in our tiny organization, was just this recognition, just the naming of burnout, and giving people an extra day within the month to do, whatever they needed to do. So that's something that's a boost to well-being. I would advocate for like a program, it's a systemic issue, but a program that kind of looks at the well-being umbrella, takes a look at like the benefits and the cultural piece and the engagement piece, and starts pulling it all together to identify it as well-being. Again, it's part of that awareness that this social connection is an important piece. So those are two examples in the workplace I can think of, is literally giving people a reward of taking a break, giving people space to spend some time donating their time to their favorite charities. Some organizations also match donations to charity, but then that's a bit just, an afterthought, like I'm donating my money and I feel good about that, but I'm not actually getting that well-being boost of working at the food bank, or, assembling bicycles for kids, or that kind of thing. So those things I think really help people just get in touch with something that's, of value and a wider connection. So do you guys do any of that, or have you done any of that in your professional life?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because as you were talking through, especially about the holidays, because if someone offered me an extra £20,000 or an extra 20 days holiday, I would always take an extra 20 days holiday personally. Because the time that you then have with a family to recharge, etc., is much more valuable to me personally than money. And I know I've got a very good friend who's a HR director, and I've worked with her on and off for over 20 years. And this was back in probably 2005, 6. I can't remember what we actually called it at the time, but she introduced a HR or an employee cafeteria, where you could, that's your package, but then you could say, well, actually, I'd rather have more holidays and have less salary, or I'd rather have more of X and less of that. So it then allowed you, and obviously within certain parameters, because otherwise, if you've got lots of employees, it's very difficult to manage. But I think we use an external company to help manage that, and I think that worked really well. And I'm not saying that everybody had perfect well-being and we're all deliriously happy, but certainly I know for a fact that there's lots of people who have been at that company, even though myself and the HR director have left, who've been there since that time. And I think one of the reasons they've been there since that time is because they feel that they are valued by that company. And I directly attribute it to what my friend put in place at that time, and it's still there and still going strong. So it's certainly something that I'm very keen and an advocate of, because I think that people often assume that, oh, well, just give someone more money and they'll be happy. And that's very rarely the case. I'm not saying there are some people who are very, very financially driven, and that's what they want from a job. It's a transactional engagement, but there's lots of others, and probably more, that actually have other things that they're trying to get from their workplace, and have therefore different drivers than just, oh, well, as long as you give me a pay rise and a promotion every year or every 2 years, then I'll never leave. So I think having different ways of looking at how you can reward and recognize people to actually make them feel like they're valued and make them get that social connection, not just from the workplace, but as you just highlighting, that outside of that workplace. I think that's really important, actually, from my own personal point of view.
Yeah, and I like what you described, that kind of cafeteria style, or that flexibility of there's a range of options depending on, what is personally, valuable to you. And sometimes a range of options, I think another thing that we haven't thought about in the workplace is the employees' kind of needs across a lifespan, right? So in your 20s, you're like, great, give me the money. In the States, we've got, student loans, we are trying to save for a house, like all that stuff. But when you're in your 50s or 60s, you're like, you know what, I just need, I might need an extra day, or, I really want to I've been involved in a charity through, my community, and that has value to me, and I want to, dedicate some more service time there. So do we, allow for that flexibility, and then also recognize kind of across the lifespan, our needs are different, right? Both, physically, socially, mental health wise, midlife, we're also taking, a lot of folks are taking care of kids and elders, right? And so how are we, allowing for this cafeteria of options to both incentivize, if you will, to say, I see you, but also kind of recognize the different needs across the lifespan. So I've worked at places where there's also, in the some place where people get coffee, there are puzzles out so people can take a mental break, if you will, and meeting. I'm going to go and I'm going to literally do, a 2,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, and people just stop and participate when they can. So sometimes there's this, are we only incentivizing the brain one particular way, or are we kind of offering some diversions? Is there some something craft wise that people are, that's another thing that I've heard of in people's workplaces, where people can stop by and make something, right? So there's like a creative corner, but again, that depends on people being in the workplace, if you will. But we do need to recognize this flexibility of what people consider well-being, what their needs for well-being. Let's offer some options for them to address it. And it is on the agenda. Like I said, there's articles in Forbes that I've seen in a lot of places where people are saying, we don't feel taken care of in the workplace for the stressors of the workplace, right, that are coming our way, or that we have been uncovered more in the pandemic. So people are
I think it's great that business, and it's not just businesses, but I think the society, there's lots of things that are now being brought to the fore in society. I think it's been accelerated by COVID, but well-being and mental health is one of those that I think, if you went back 5-6 years, certainly in the UK, if you were sitting there as a manager talking about someone's well-being and mental health, they'd have been looking at you thinking, oh, what's he talking about, or what's she talking about? Whereas now it's so much part of the public debate. I mean, you obviously thankfully did that little podcast about Naomi Osaka, and I think that things like that have really elevated it, because I think in the past people have just assumed, well, if you're a high-performing individual and you've got loads of money and you're in the public eye, well, everybody would want that, wouldn't they? So how can you possibly have well-being or mental health challenges if you're in that situation. And I think that, so people like Naomi Osaka, and there's other sports people and other celebrities that have come out and said they need mental health breaks, etc. I think that helps people in what we'd call normal professions and in normal life say, well, actually, if they can have that issue, well, it's not a surprise that I can then. And I think that's really been advantageous to bring these sorts of discussions into the workplace and to be open and honest about these sorts of things.
Well, there's one thing that is interesting is that I did read an article, I think again, it was in Harvard Business Review, that sometimes on the engagement survey, the people who are hyper engaged, right, they're overly engaged, they're at most risk for burnout. So we're not just saying, let's address the disengaged, sometimes what's going on for the people who are high performing, it might be that anxiety underneath the surface. There might be some other things going on. So it's interesting when we kind of unpack, what's underneath these things, because you might say, oh, great, I don't have to think about that, right? Because phew, they're high performing, but sometimes there's something underneath the high performing. And again, we don't know. If people don't reveal, we don't know. But let's kind of create some options for people to avail themselves to resources or flexible things that address well-being. So I'm seeing more in job postings, people, well-being is in all of the job postings, right? Yeah. That I'm exaggerating. I haven't seen all of them, but we'll give you, wellness credit. We'll give you, whatever it is. And in the States, when you were talking about, wanting extra days off, to my American colleagues, we get what's called PTO, paid time off. You start somewhere, you get 2 weeks. PTO is both vacation and sick, So if I have 10 days total in my year that I'm going to take off, and you're going to say, well, if I'm sick, then I don't get to take that as a vacation day. That incentivizes me to go to work sick because I need my vacation, right? So that I see that everybody's working hard, or this has been a really, the situational awareness about the pandemic. Let's reward someone with an extra day off or an extra week off. It's like, that seems pretty easy to accomplish, especially for the benefit of somebody being recharged when they come back and able to be a better employee, if you will.
Well, it's very interesting, actually, because I think I have to check it because I haven't looked at it recently. But when you look at the productivity stats, I think just intellectually, people would always think, oh, America must be really high up on the productivity stats because, the view of the American workplace, aggressive, hardworking, never take breaks, etc. But it's actually quite low down. And I think that one of the reasons for that would be that actually they don't have theoretically enough time to recharge and relax and get to peak performance, because everyone's expecting peak performance all the time. So it's and England is similar, changing a bit, but England is similar that taking time off, or should I say not taking time off, is used to be seen as a badge of honor. Oh, he's always working, whereas I see that as a potential for burnout. And I have people in my team who will say, oh, can I either get paid for my holidays or can I take them up to next year? And I'm actually probably quite draconian when it comes to holidays. I think that, unless there's a real reason, and obviously have that discussion with them, you should be taking a decent amount of holidays to be able to recharge, spend time with the family, or whatever it is that you do to relax. And I know some people say, oh, but I'm so busy. If I take time off, I'll have more work to do. And I think, well, yeah, but you're going to be much less productive if you're just working constantly without any kind of breaks or time to recuperate. And I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but it's certainly what I've seen for, in terms of the precursor of burnout, is people being very productive, always wanting to work hard, the boss thinking, oh, well, that's great because she never takes any time off. And then before you know it, they're off on long-term sick with stress.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, some places here are promoting that, within a quarter, you have to take a week off. And some of those benefits, or maybe it's every 4 months, maybe 3 times a year, but some of those benefits are also, that might be use it or lose it. You might still have a certain vacation allowance, but we're going to try to make you recharge and regenerate, and we'll figure it out. Work will always be there, basically.
Oh, yes.
But it is important for people to recharge, and maybe people are losing their skill set there, right? So they don't know what it's like to unplug, or they haven't fostered some of those social or community connections or hobbies outside of work. And so those are the things that sustain us and sustain our health. It's in the public health circles of the importance of well-being and mental health. The social and community piece is always a significant pillar in there. So let's start practicing those new skills. Let's take up archery. Why not?
So just because we're coming to the end of our hour, I think we've actually even gone for over an hour, but it doesn't matter. So in terms of reading, because I always ask now my podcast guests to just give me something that people could read, what they're reading. Is there anything that, and it splits into two, I suppose, that people can read to help with their well-being? And then second question, is there anything that people who are managing people can read to help with understanding well-being, mental health, etc., to make them able to create that culture that we've talked about throughout the podcast?
So I have to get back to you on that to see if there's anybody writing in that space in particular. So when I think of recently, I've been reading things that are completely unrelated to work. So I've kind of gone in the direction of fiction for the first time in my life. So you caught me with, not having books.
No, that's fine. The podcast won't be out immediately, so I'll give you a bit of time, and then I can, if you think of anything that's relevant, I can drop it into the podcast description so that people can link in. So we've talked about a mass of things here in terms of what is well-being, and we defined it around the feelings about work and life, and also the biopsychosocial and the connection. We've talked about the purpose, or not the purpose, but the importance of doing something about it, because even if you're not bothered about someone's well-being, as in, because you should be, because you're human and they're human and you should be interested, then from a purely hardcore business point of view, then you've got to look at the ROI, which is what we talked about, and the absenteeism and the cost of actually not looking into it. And we've also talked about the importance of creating the right culture and the right environment, and you've given quite a few tips. One of those is an engagement survey that would be good as a starting point, and acknowledging when you're dealing with people that there may well be an issue, and not having to know everything yourself. So there's a whole raft of stuff there, as you'd expect, in an hour. So if there's one thing you could leave my listeners with about well-being and well-being in the current age, what would it be?
So it's a little bit different than what we've talked about, but well-being starts with the individual. And I would encourage your listeners to identify the things that they do, the habits that they have that recharge or refuel their own bucket, whether or not that's, having a fitness, or eating well, hydrating, going for a walk with a friend, like participating in an artistic hobby, whatever it is. I would encourage your listeners to identify their own list of things that improve their well-being, and notice if they do or don't prioritize it on a daily basis, and then move towards prioritizing it. So again, if fitness, we talked about fitness last time, if you know that's something that increases your own well-being, do you prioritize that, or do you let meetings get in the way or other things get in the way? So I would encourage your listeners to identify their own list of things that improve their well-being, and if they don't already prioritize it, make sure that it becomes a daily habit, and then everybody can lead by example in that way.
Well, sage advice as always, and as I always say, an absolute pleasure to have you on again, Anne, and really enjoyed it, and I know my listeners will have enjoyed it and will be writing millions of questions as per always. So thank you very much for joining me, and I hope that the listeners really enjoy it as much as I have.
All right. It's been a pleasure to be here, Hakeem. I really enjoyed it. And I think that well-being is very important. So let's get our well-being levels up.
Thank you very much.